Hi, everybody. It's Eric. Thanks for listening to this podcast from KX 93.5. We invite you to listen to more music and talk on our grassroots nonprofit radio station right here in Laguna Beach from anywhere in the world on kx935.com/listen or on our smartphone apps. Right now, here's Awakening Code Radio from KX 93.5. And thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you. This is kind of, I would say, in almost 4 years of doing this show, our most grave and important and serious of shows. And we always talk about we're not going to go down dark alleys. We're not going to send a fearful message. But that's more or less down the conspiracy path. If there is something truly affecting our lives, our health, and our future, it's not like we're not going to talk about that. And our guest tonight, we had Charles Langley. Hello.
Good evening.
And Nina
Babiars.
I'll say that correctly. And you're from a local group called Public Watchdogs?
Yes.
Okay, and what does Public Watchdogs do?
Our mission is to protect the public from the California Public Utilities Commission and other rogue regulatory agencies. And our primary mission right now, an important goal, is to get the nuclear waste off the beach at San Onofre.
Okay, so those listeners that maybe aren't super familiar with the Southern California coast, we have a big nuclear-powered generating station owned by Edison that was probably built in, I'm guessing, the 70s maybe?
1968.
68. Wow. So we're talking about kind of the early phases of nuclear power generating, and it looks like two big, can I say boobs on the radio? I think I can.
I think you can say it, and that's what my dad used to always refer to it as. Every time we drove down to San Diego or to Mexico, he would always say we're passing the boobs.
Yeah,
right
that's
now.
just what ours happen to look like. Of course, a lot of people got very familiar with sort of that hourglass shape from 3 Mile Island, or maybe even Chernobyl might have had that, or The Simpsons. The Simpsons, the nuclear power plant there has that sort of hourglass shaped thing. So you're not just focusing only on San Onofre. You're just kind of a watchdog group that anything that's going on that might be sort of swept under the carpet from public view, you're going to make sure people know about it.
Well, yeah, our big concern with San Onofre is that we're seeing regulatory failure where the cops on the beat, the people that are out there that are supposed to be protecting us and our interests, have been more or less asleep at the wheel. What we saw was a near-miss nuclear disaster there that could have resulted in cascading tube failures that would have been a real nightmare, potentially another Fukushima. They shut the reactors down, they shut the generators down, and now they're leaving the waste on the beach. So essentially it's kind of like building a toilet that you can't flush, and they've got this waste there, and nobody really knows what to do with it.
And no one's talking about it. It doesn't seem like it's very public. A lot of people don't know anything about it.
Well, it's hard to believe, but last October 6th, our California Coastal Commission gave Edison a permit to bury millions of pounds of radioactive nuclear waste on San Onofre State Beach Park. In the middle of 8.5 million people. And then you have to keep in mind how I got involved. I work in transportation, and how I got involved is I looked at this, for people unfamiliar with our area. San Onofre sits right beside the second busiest rail corridor in the United States. It carries goods from Mexico and San Diego up to Los Angeles and the Long Beach port, and distributes goods all over the nation. In addition to that, carries 7.5 million passengers on rail and transit.
Metrolink is really popular now.
Exactly.
The Surfliner, I think, train.
Sure. Yeah.
Is that
So you have to keep in mind you can't see radioactive, nuclear radioactivity. You can't smell it like our wildfires, and it knows no political boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
either.
Well, we're going to talk about, we can't have this conversation, I don't think, without talking about Fukushima. And maybe what we'll do, start off, I think we'll go ahead and play a song, but what we're going to start off is sort of on an elemental basis, describe how nuclear power generating stations work. Because I think there's just a lot of people that think, hey, you're splitting atoms, if they even know that far. We know it's nuclear powered. It is fission. We're splitting atoms, and thinking that energy somehow is magically just turned into, it must be so much energy, we're just harnessing it, and that becomes electricity. But it is really almost more comically simple than that. It's like taking the highest technology that we know of, splitting an atom so far, is generating power and driving the oldest technology that we know of. It's almost like an old steam locomotive. You're heating water to create steam to push something or to turn something, exactly like a paddle wheel steamer, 150 years ago or whatever. It is, all we're trying to do is create steam, heat, boil water to turn a turbine, and that turbine is generating electricity. It's a copper coil around a magnet. It's like Tesla electronics, 150 years ago. And that's the best. So it's like almost like, I was telling Elena about it earlier tonight. She's like taking a jet engine and lighting a candle with it or something like that. It is the highest technology and the lowest technology. And all along, I'm sure it was probably just, we need power now. How can we generate it? And there's no such thing as a free ride. There's no perpetual motion device. So we know we have to burn some energy to create the energy we need. And it's like, hey, this nuclear power thing, it looks like it just goes off by itself in a never-ending chain of activity. That's pretty great. It's like, yes, that is great, but all the waste byproduct, I think they just, in the 60s, 70s, just said, that's for future generations to figure out. And we'll talk about the longevity of how long this stuff stays nuclear reactive and stays dangerous if it gets out into the environment, in the ecosystem, in the oceans. We have to talk about that. So we're going to. Tonight it is all about just becoming more aware of how nuclear power works, the threats of it, and how you can get involved to stop and at least be, like these folks here, a watchdog. Be aware, because they're not going to tell you on the news what's going on. This is kind of backroom deals that get made, shuffling all this nuclear waste around. So we're looking for solutions on Awakening Code Radio.
And it's very time sensitive, as Nina was talking about before we went on the air.
This particular event, San Onofre, is very time sensitive.
Because the good news is we can still stop this.
Stop it from, at least from the plan that they have in place right now, which is not a very good plan. So we're going to, I thought this was a good thematic song. This is Marvin Gaye, talking about what's going on. What are we doing to ourselves? Let's think about it, everybody. What are we doing? It's not the short picture. We want to be around for a while, right? All right. We'll be right back. You're listening to Awakening Code Radio.
Mother, there's too many of you crying. Brother, there's far too many of you dying. You know we've got to find a way to bring some loving here today. Yeah. Father, we don't need to escalate. You see, war is not the answer, for only love can conquer hate. You know we've got to find a way to bring some love in here today. Oh, picket lines and picket signs. Don't punish me with brutality. Talk to me so you can see what's going on. What's going on? What's going on? Yeah, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Right on. Right on. Right on. Everybody thinks we're at home. Oh, but who are they to judge us? Simply cause our hair is long. Oh, you know we've got to find a way. Bring some understanding here today. Picket line and picket signs. Don't punish me with brutality. Come on, talk to me can see what's going on. Yeah, what's going on? Tell me what's going on. I'll tell you what's going on. Right on. Right on. Right on.
This is Admin Colleen, and you're listening to Awakening Code Radio with host Eric Rankin. You can find Awakening Code Radio on iTunes, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and free podcasts are always available at kx935.com.
Thank you, Admin Colleen. She is the brains and the creativity behind Awakening Code Radio all week long. She gets a whole lot more views of the stuff that she's posting all week than I really do as we're broadcasting to you live here from the FM radio station, because she's constantly reaching out. She's making YouTube videos. We're just so blessed to have her be a part of our team. So thank you, Colleen. We're talking about nuclear power in broad strokes right now. And I kind of left the last segment just saying it's in some ways so low tech. It is taking the highest tech that we know right now. We're splitting atoms. In fact, Einstein even knew where we were going to try and generate power with nuclear power or energy by boiling water. And he said, what a ridiculous way to boil water. I mean, we're coming up with this highest tech Jules Verne type of energy origination we can think of, and we're more or less just doing it to boil water to create steam to turn a turbine which will generate electricity. And we've been turning turbines with all kinds of other ways. Through the first big one in America was Niagara Falls. Both Edison and Tesla were fighting to see who was going to get that power station to run their type of power. Edison was DC power, Tesla was AC power, but it was just taking falling water and turning turbines. That's the way we generate electricity, is a big copper coil spinning around a magnet. That's what makes electricity. It's kind of low tech in some ways. So we got really excited about it. I'm sure that it seemed like, gosh, this is a godsend almost. It's almost limitless free energy. All we got to do is purify this uranium. We made it in rods. We submerged it in water. It's a closed, contained cooling system, but it requires a lot of outside water to keep it cool. So that's why they're always built by rivers or oceans, is because we need a lot of fresh water circulating around this enclosed cooling system. And everything's fine until. So it's like all fun and games, and it's great. Oh, we've got this cheap energy. Man, it doesn't require lots of hardware. It's actually pretty rudimentary if you can figure out how to split an atom. The two problems are if something goes wrong geologically, like an earthquake or a tsunami. Both of those happened at Fukushima. First, they had an earthquake, and there's 6 generating stations at Fukushima, and all of them did what they were supposed to do in an earthquake. They became inactive, all automatically, without even any human intervention. In the case of an earthquake, they knew to disengage the fuel rods and have it shut down carefully and slowly. That was happening, and that's great. What they weren't counting on was the tsunami, the whole plant getting flooded by water, by seawater. And so all of the backup generating capability, all the backup battery systems, all became submerged. And then it just became a dead plant full of nuclear activity still happening. And 3 of the reactors went into full core meltdown. They don't even know, all these years later, they don't know how much of this core containment field is still holding this hot, molten, radioactive material. They're talking about decades of trying to clean this up. And in the meantime, if you look at a Google map of Fukushima, you see the fairly small footprint of the reactor itself, and then you see hundreds of large, hastily made storage tanks to take some of this polluted water. They weren't welded shut. They were just ratcheted together, bolted together, and they're just scattered all around the hillsides, and some of them are already leaking. And on top of that, there's been this leak out from Fukushima since it blew up 15 years ago. Was it 15 years ago? Do you remember the date?
It was in 2010, wasn't it?
2010.
No, it just, yeah.
Okay, so 5 years ago. I'm confusing it with the World Trade Center. Anyway, and I watched a YouTube video today where the radioactive water, which you said, Nina, is invisible. You can't see it. You can't smell it. There's no trace that freaks you out and like, oh, my God, the oceans are glowing or something really scary. We just know that water is now infiltrated virtually the entire Pacific Ocean. So now we have a local power plant that generates nuclear energy the same exact way with fission, splitting atoms, heating up water, turning turbines. And we had an event, how long ago?
5 years ago.
5 years ago, almost Fukushima era. And
Well, why don't we let them tell us about what happened?
I'm setting that up.
Yeah.
I'm done talking now. I'm only saying what I know. I'm done. I just wanted to give a little background information there. So
I'm so glad you did.
Bring us up to speed with San Onofre in particular.
Okay, well, what happened was on January 31, 2012, they had a radiation leak from leaking plumbing, essentially. The cooling system that cooled the generators was literally shaking itself to pieces from they called it vibrations, but what was happening was these tubes were clanging into each other, and one of them burst open. These vibrations eventually became so dangerous that they just decided to shut the entire plant down, which was a huge victory for local nuclear activists like Gary Hendricks, for example. And
San Clemente Green.
San Clemente
he headed
Green,
up San
absolutely.
Clemente Green.
And a huge victory. But now we've got a bigger problem. And the bigger problem is they're taking the waste and they're going to store it in roughly 80 large containers. These are big steel silos that are about half an inch thick, 20 feet high, 4 or 5 feet across. And they're filled with incredibly heavy, incredibly toxic uranium and plutonium. And just to give you an idea how heavy this stuff is, uranium's 6 times denser than gold. So if you can imagine how heavy an ounce of gold is, how small an ounce of uranium would be. And the problem is, this stuff is toxic to humans for 173 million years. You know, normally when we talk about radioactivity, we talk about half-lives. Well, a half-life means it's half as deadly in 15,000 years as it was today if it has a 15,000-year half-life. And we're talking about half-lives that go way beyond the longevity of even the cliffs at San Onofre. And they're going to bury this stuff on the beach in containers that are only designed to last 25 years. At least that's what the guarantee by the manufacturer says. So we've got a big problem.
And that's with no tsunami, I'm sure. If we get the big tsunami knocking over these containment vessels, all bets are off. And you made a note of it when we were corresponding by email. It's 100 feet from the ocean. We're not talking setback. It is 100 feet from the ocean at sea level. Of course, there is a seawall there. But if we have a tsunami event, all bets are off.
It's almost laughable because there's no possible worse location than you could put nuclear waste than this. And what's really terrifying is that each one of these 80 canisters has more deadly radioactivity than what was released at Chernobyl. And, you know, one of the things people don't talk about was there were cancer-related deaths and cancer-related people getting cancer still from Chernobyl in the United States. If you look online, you'll find out that there's a huge spike in thyroid cancers and a predicted spike in thyroid cancers from Fukushima on the West Coast in particular, from radioactive iodine, which is particularly dangerous. So this is a global problem, and really it depends on which way the wind's blowing and which way is the water flowing on whether or not you're going to be affected by radioactive contamination.
And just to personalize it a little more for the residents in this area, everybody will probably remember in January the impact we had of the king tides. And so at this San Onofre State Beach Park, about a third of the parking lot down on the south end you're familiar with that, Michelle, you know that was the turnaround area.
Yep.
And that's all gone. I mean, you can go to our website on publicwatchdogs.org and see photographs of exactly what the king tides took out in January. I took those pictures, and it'll clearly demonstrate how, and it's right below the bluffs where Charles is describing these canisters will be buried.
The power of water.
And so when you talk about those bluffs, it's not just that the canisters are only guaranteed for 25 years, and that's the warranty on them. But, you know, all you have to do is look at sea level studies that have been done in Del Mar and just recently completed. The bluffs at San Onofre are probably not even going to be there. So you have to consider Mother Nature.
It does sound baffling when we talk about it like this, that we think this is going on and no one's really hearing about it. And we are the people that have a voice, but we've got to be educated by people like you that have all these facts, that know what's going on. And it seems like what it all boils down to is where the money flow is and why we got to this point.
Well, Charles's comment about regulatory failure is inclusive of, appointed officials, elected officials, and judges, et cetera. There's that aspect as well. So you might want to elaborate on that a little, Charles, as to exactly, what's contributing to the regulatory failure.
Well, the first form of regulatory failure is that these generators that they were operating there, and you talked about steam locomotives. Basically what failed was the boiler that produced the steam. And these steam generators were not licensed by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission says that if you're going to make any changes to an existing design, then you have to go through a design review process. And that would have meant that Southern California Edison, the owner and the licensee, would have had to spend years showing that their new design was going to work. They made 8 basic changes to those generators. Some of them were really huge. They used round pipes when before they were using square pipes. They got rid of stay cylinders, all egg crate supports, all this stuff. The list goes on. But just one of those changes was enough to invoke a license review. There was no license review, and legally, if you're driving without a license and you get in an accident, it's your fault. Mm-hmm. This was Edison's fault, yet the ratepayers ended up paying for this thing. They were operating this reactor without a license. And what's worse, and the evidence that's coming out recently, thanks to one of their fire safety officers and engineers who's come forward and is talking about it, is they were redlining these generators to produce more energy, particularly in Unit 3. They were operating them at higher steam temperatures than what they were designed to handle. So,
and why would they do that?
Because what it did was it spun the turbines faster, which generated more electricity, which generated more revenue quickly. And there's even evidence suggesting that they intentionally did that on the old generators so they could wear those things out faster, make more money, and then they'd make money on the replacement steam generators. So it's all a money game for Edison. And the bottom line, the upshot is that they were operating experimental nuclear generator.
Yeah, this is 1968 technology.
Yeah, they supposedly improved it. They said we're improving it with a like-for-like replacement. Now, the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, defines like-for-like as identical. These things were in no way identical. It was a entirely new experimental design. Now, you can understand 1968. We just put a man on the moon. It was the space age. We were going to be flying around in George Jetson cars. I still want one of those things.
Me too.
But they really thought we'd be able to solve the waste problem. And the waste problem is the big problem with nuclear energy.
Well, Charles, you have a great analogy about those souped-up generators, and maybe an analogy would kind of put it in perspective for the listeners in terms of what kind of an engine might have gone into an older car.
Well, yeah, for people who like cars, it'd be like taking a a Buick 455 engine and shoving it into a Miata and leaving the old radiator in, and not, just the thing overheated. The plumbing on this thing overheated, and it literally shook to pieces. And they could not start it back up at full power. They could have possibly run it at partial power, but it was still an experimental generator, and it was a reckless experiment. Somebody at Edison, or a group of somebodies, intentionally decided to put profits ahead of public safety, and in the process they risked 8.5 million lives, and it has not been prosecuted, and that's a real sticking point.
It's important to note also those generators were supposed to last 40 years, and I think they ended up lasting 11 months before the leak, the radiation leak.
Yeah, Unit 3 leaked after 11 months.
And so what did we pay for then?
Right, exactly right. A whole bunch of money that the users paid for. And the big thing maybe that we haven't talked about, I'm always trying to pull it back just to the broad scope, is when this nuclear power, scenario, as we were comparing other things, burning coal or whatever to create heat, to turn turbines, all back to very simple stuff, there was supposed to be a waste management system built at the same time. So we knew that we were going to have nuclear waste. And there were things on the board, like in Colorado, I believe, there's supposed to be this giant underground, under-mountain, mega bunker, super safe
Nevada
containment system that never even got started.
Well, the Department of Energy had 40 years and $40.1 billion with a B dollars to do their job, and they didn't do it. Over 40 years, they had a responsibility to find a national repository and to move the nuclear waste, not just here from San Onofre, but we have 104, I think, nuclear facilities across the country that we're counting on the Department of Energy to do their job over the course of 40 years. And so that became a political football, and, it just was serendipitous. And so what we're talking about with San Onofre, we're the guinea pigs on this, is only because of what Charles described in terms of the abrupt closure. So this is really applicable to everybody else in the country. It's in all of our backyards.
Wow. How are we hearing so much carry-through noise?
I know. I'm like, who's laughing?
Is that downstairs? I think it's downstairs at the wine gallery, but that's a very happy group. They're they're out on the street. Well, they won't be there for long. This is a good time for maybe us to break to a song. You're listening to Awakening Code Radio. I picked this song, Michelle, because I just know how much you love Ecstatic Union, talking about our mother, the planet. We want to respect our little,
thank you for this,
lifeboat here floating in space. This is called Mother by Ecstatic Union.
Slow down, sit by the river, close to the water's edge. Beneath the trees that surround you, breathe in their medicine. Naked upon the earth, basking in the mana. Blessed be you flying free with the mother and the father. Plant your seed, gardener of the universe, and spread your wings, fly home with our family. Come on, swim with the dolphin in the ocean of infinity. Relax and release all worry, lie upon the shore. Remember you are the center, the eye of the storm. Spiraling beauty, a golden liquid galaxy. Children of the sun gather to sing. Mother Earth, she is awakening through us. we gonna plant our seeds? We gardeners of the universe and spread our wings, fly home with star family. Come on and swim with me, dolphin in ocean ahead, infinity. Gathered here with one another, opening up as one. As I gaze into your eyes to see my reflection, tribe of Gaia, unite, unite, yes, and like this fire, we rise to plant our seeds in this garden of the universe and spread our wings, fly home with this family. Come on and swim with me, a dolphin in the ocean of infinity.
Hello, this is Michael Tillinger from South Africa. I'm the founder of the Global Ubuntu Movement. I'm a researcher into origins of humankind, who we are, where we come from, why we're here, and the provider of some possible solutions of where humanity can go and find a utopian place in this beautiful world that we occupy, the Ubuntu Movement. And you're listening to Awakening Code Radio.
I love Michael Tillinger, and I love what he says about just how we can come together and unify. And Eric, thank you so much for playing that song. It does feel like we're in the eye of the storm, but Mother Earth is awakening through us. And we were building up, telling where we've come from, what's happening, but we also have an opportunity to say to our listeners, we are the people, and when we unify, there are things that we can do. And this process of awakening has to do with us taking our head out of the sand and saying, this doesn't just affect me and my children, it affects all the future generations. This is what the Native Americans right now in South Dakota, they're all standing together, unified because of this pipeline project that's happening, the Dakota pipeline. And thousands of people are coming out saying, no, we're not going to stand for it anymore. Mother Earth needs us to come to her aid. These are not natural solutions. And so I would love for us to talk, and I know Victoria McBain will give her a shout out. She's been writing in because this is a topic she's very passionate about. She was with me when we went to, when San Clemente Green and Gary Hedricks gathered the groups. We went in mass, and this was before the plant was even shut down. We went to let our voices be heard, and we were spilling out of the doors of that courtroom that day. This was years ago. And it did feel like we're all joining together to do something that's greater than all of us, and it's for all of us. It's not just it's not in my backyard kind of thing. Like you said, both of you have said, this is a global issue. It isn't just about San Onofre. It's about where we're going from here as a society and what we can do to let our voices be heard. But one person can't do it by themselves. We do need to unify. So what are your solutions? What are your proposed solutions on what we can personally do to take a stance?
Do you want to take that now?
I love it. They're
One of
both
you.
looking at each other. Who wants to speak to the topic?
Well, I think that awareness is just the first step. Information and awareness is just the first step to being empowered as people, individuals, as well as collectively, like you indicated. But, there is a strength in that, and there is a powerful force that has created this situation. And it's up to us to determine whether or not the corporate profits are going to determine, our safety and our future for kids and grandchildren. The future is something that we have to protect as well. I mean, we have a really special piece of the world here in Southern California. And, you referenced the Native Americans. I mean, this little stretch of land here was protected for many generations before we came in and, built on it. But, we've got a responsibility to protect such a precious gift. Really.
Where so many people from around the world love to come and visit.
Right.
Yeah, because it is paradise. We've often said, we're walking along the beach saying, oh my gosh, we live here. We live here. It is so beautiful here. And we have had a spiritual elder from the Ahashiman tribe, the Juanino Band of Indians. Her name's Adelia Sandoval, and she's a very, very good friend of mine. She has been here talking about how long her ancestors have been walking this land, and they built the San Juan mission. That was her ancestors were here built that. So now that we're in this predicament, where do we go from here? Lori Taylor is writing in and saying she wants to know, what can we do? She's a wonderful advocate for the area, and she loves to be a voice to let people know what it is we can do to give our listeners, once they've had the shock factor wear off of, wow, this is really big, this is huge.
Well, it is a time-sensitive situation that we have here, and that is that Public Watchdogs has been able to verify with the California Energy Commission that the casks that, you can see pictures of the casks that have already been delivered. They're sitting on the beach. We have verified with the California Energy Commission that they're currently being inspected, and that they're going to start burying this in the spring of 2017 into the beach. And so this is time sensitive, but it also represents, on the positive side, an opportunity, and the opportunity is right here, right now. That's why we're here tonight. And we drove up from San Diego to talk about the opportunity that, people being aware of this.
Is there a phone number they can call? Is there a petition they can sign? How are we getting people to have our voices be heard?
Hey, we've got to talk to these elected officials on every single level. The San Diego County supervisors, the Orange County supervisors, your city council people, people in Sacramento, on every level. I mean, we just have to speak up. You can't have this awareness and not be empowered to speak out. They work for us, and I think people really have to keep that in mind. I've been working for many years with various levels of, government, and people sometimes are intimidated to call or write their elected officials. Hey, they work for us. And so it's a great opportunity right now to know that you have the power and the information to contact and say, this isn't good enough.
Do you have a form letter on your website or anything that people can use your verbiage and your word choices so that the facts are there and they can call? And do you have the names of the elected officials to contact?
Well, that's a great idea, and we can very easily do that because I've done that type of thing for other boards that I've sat on and done outreach in terms of how to talk and meet with your elected officials and, exactly how to draft a letter like that. So we could do that very easily for our members.
I know that the Dakota Pipeline, they sent out, and social media is a great way to get this out. There's a lot of stuff being posted about that on Facebook. And while I just came back from Cancun, Mexico. I was on a family vacation, and I do a lot of ceremonies for the earth. We're sitting just praying with the water because water is a conductor of energy. And Dr. Masaru Emoto talks about how you can put your prayers into water and have them be amplified, and that it's listening and hearing. And so we do dolphin boat trips where we're putting that energy into the water and asking for the original keys and codes to peace on earth to be activated again through this cohesive container that we create. So in Cancun, I happened to see on Facebook that they were asking for people to contact President Obama and call his office. And ironically, the phone number they gave ends in 1111. Did you know that? No. For the president's office, Victoria got through.
Oh, really?
And she got through and she talked to an assistant. And I think it was the next day or 2 days later that President Obama put a pause and put a stop in place so that it's not over yet. But he definitely said we need to look further into this and paused it for now. So there's a lot of court stuff going on. But that's what I'd like to see is if we know the names of the people to contact and their phone numbers, and then give us a draft of what we can say in order to have our voices be heard and have us be saying the same thing, because that's how we unify.
That's a great idea. We'd be happy to do it for
That's a good idea. So the big question, we're going to spin to the top of the hour in a few minutes, but the big question is if the nuclear waste at San Onofre is not buried in the way that they're proposing, which is probably the simplest proposal, I would imagine, most cost effective for Edison and, lose the least amount of money. Where can this waste go? If we don't have a containment system like they were proposing in Nevada, what are some options for any of these 104 nuclear reactors in the country? Where can that waste go?
There's a town in Texas that has volunteered to take the waste on a temporary basis. And temporary, by the way, according to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, is 300 years. So when you hear people talking about temporary nuclear storage, it's not for 10 or 15 years. It's pretty much for the rest of your life. But there's a town in Texas that's interested in taking it. It's on the rail lines. And Congressman Darrell Issa is supporting and championing this. And one of the double-edged swords of this is that he's someone who's a pro-nuclear advocate. He wants to build more power plants, and that's his motivation for solving the waste problem, at least temporarily.
But, when you think about this, it's really not a political issue because radioactivity, nuclear radiation knows no political or geographic bounds.
Right.
It's not going to discriminate between race, color, sex, geography. It's lethal and it's toxic. So I just wanted to point that out, that it's non-discriminatory.
Well, getting it away from the coast makes a lot of sense because what we did learn from Fukushima is this water is going into the Pacific Ocean, right. and the water system, our planet really only has one ocean and one water system. It evaporates and becomes clouds and falls as rain and snow and runs down as freshwater rivers and goes into underwater aquifers and lakes and streams and oceans, but it's really one system. Right. So as soon as the nuclear waste gets introduced to our global water system, it's there. It might not be super concentrated, but it's there. And we're trying to keep that, all these waterside nuclear sites, I would imagine that out of the 104, most of them are built next to a river or a lake or an ocean for this coolant water, this endless supply.
All of them.
All of them. Mm-hmm. So that becomes a big issue, is we don't want to pollute the waters.
Well, the other thing is that, there was an article in this morning's paper about a plant down in Alabama, Charles, that, was designed, billions of dollars spent to build it, and it's going to be sold for another purpose simply because it's no longer, nuclear energy with some of the more cost-effective energies, renewables, et cetera. It's just not going to be a nuclear plant. So, it's not as competitive an industry. So you're going to see more of these plants closing across the country, and this nuclear waste is going to be buried on site everywhere unless people step up. And again, this is the opportunity to become more informed and to be proactive. And that's very empowering. It's about time that, we take some of the power away from the corporations that are making decisions based on their bottom line, and put our priority, our safety, and our future, health of our world a priority.
Yeah. What we really need is a nuclear renaissance, and it has to be a nuclear waste renaissance in terms of handling it.
Right, that's what it needs to be, nuclear waste renaissance, not necessarily the generating. We're using it on aircraft carriers and satellites and everything else. It's the what do we do with the waste byproduct? And
here, 50, 60 years after we really started using the technology full on, we still don't have a solution for the waste. And, in Finland, they basically dug a hole 2 miles deep in solid granite, and there was a town that decided that they were going to be responsible for that waste, that they were going to take the hit for the rest of the country. But there aren't too many communities like that in the United States that are willing to do that, and there aren't too many in geologically stable areas that aren't located near groundwater. I mean, this stuff is toxic.
Or fault lines, our planet is alive and breathing and shifting and heating up and cooling down, and plates are sliding against each other.
But all you got to do is reach back into history, because if you go back to history and you look at how gasoline came to market, it was a waste product.
Right.
And so a little bit of creative strategies here. You have people informed, aware, taking advantage of opportunity and coming together like you were talking about, Michelle. It is important that we do come together on this. Creative strategies can turn a ball game around.
Yeah, this is Victoria just texted me, let's take back control of our world.
There you go.
I can hear her saying it with such passion, with her hand in the air, because it is time. And that's why I love that we're a part of this show called Awakening Code Radio, because it's time for us to awaken from the slumber of just every day getting back on the hamster wheel and being in our box and watching our TV, our little box, and going to earn a living and not really thinking about what's happening around us or what's happening with the earth. And the Native Americans have known this forever, since the beginning of time. That's why so many of the events that I go to are centered around what the indigenous people have been trying to help us remember. And now we're at this time. I believe transparency is here now, that we're starting to see things that a lot of people didn't really want us to see before. And once we really take those glasses off and see things clearly, by having people like you on the show to help put it into perspective. And Eric, you did a great job of lining it up, because do most people even know how their light bulb turns on in their house? I don't know if people really know the mechanics of how are you lighting your house, and where does it come from? It's not just about a bill that you pay every month.
We've become very removed of how anything happens. We have reached the top of the hour, and this is a good time to just play that out. And we'll go ahead and just move into a song before we come back. So we'll be out for about 4 minutes, but stay with us. We're going to be talking about, all of our options, and it really is about awakening, because, and we're going to get deeper into this, but we were just kind of lulled by big companies. We thought any big company, DuPont and Dow and Edison and Hostess and any of these companies, if they existed, we thought they must be the good guys. They're not going to do something that's not good for us. And all along, we're realizing that if you're just out to make the buck, a lot of the stuff just sort of gets shunted off to the side. And how do we make the most amount of money? They are companies at the end of the day. So, you know what? There is a lot of hope. We'll be right back. We're going to hear from Cora Flora real quick, and then Sly and the Family Stone. This is our disclaimer.
KXRN LP Laguna Niguel, Laguna Beach. Member supported KX 93.5. This disclaimer is a statement notifying the listening audience that any opinion expressed on the air is not reflective of KX 93.5, its management, or its board of directors.
Hey, this is Cora Flora, and you're listening to Awakening Code Radio. Thank you for being you and loving music.
dust away.
Everybody wants to shine. Who'll come out on a cloudy day?
'Tis the sun that loves you brown. When the system tries to bring you down,
Never had to shine tonight. You don't need darkness to do what you think is
Everybody is a star. I can feel it when you shine on me.
I love you for who you are, not the one you feel you need to be.
ever catch a falling star? Ain't no stopping till it's in the ground.
Everybody is a star. One big circle rolling
This is Reverend Danielle, founder of the Temple of Light Spiritual Community, bringing you music, love, and blessings from Laguna Beach at Awakening Code Radio.
Thank you, Reverend Danielle. We love her from the Temple of Light. Wow. Sometimes when we're off air, we talk so much about everything we want to share when we're on air. And I want to thank you both for being able to articulate where we go from here and sharing that unity consciousness, that collaborative spirit. I really feel like we're moving into a time where the only way we're going to get things done is when we do it together. Yes. And so off air, you were talking about, Nina, you were talking about different letters you've written to different agencies. And
well, Public Watchdogs has come together because, you know, some of these elected officials are just banking on the fact that people are so busy with their lives. I mean, let's face it, it takes a lot to raise a family, go to work, and all of life. And so who has the time to go to some of these hearings and meetings? And Charles and I and some of our board members have been doing that. And so, you know, we dog, no pun intended, but we dog a lot of these issues, and it takes a lot of time, but we're very proactive. And so I would like to invite your listeners to look at our website. We've been writing letters, for example, to the Environmental Public Agency with regard to the levels of radioactivity allowed in water, and the California Lands Commission and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And it's going to go on and on. We do need to be supported by people that are interested, because it is a way, I mean, that's why we exist. It is a way to come together.
have you contacted the Native American community that are when I talk about the Band of Indians, the Mission Indians, and Adelia Sandoval, I'm sure they'd love to get involved.
I would love to contact them, so I'd like to work with you in order to do that. But it's going to require a collaborative spirit, and that's kind of where we're coming from, taking the lead on this, knowing the background and all the gory details we're talking about. It requires that somebody follow and put a spotlight on some of these elected officials and corporations and the decisions that they're making and the legislation that they're passing. There's a level of accountability that's required that they have, and so it's public watchdogs is a way to do that. So, I'd like to invite your listeners to support what we're doing, because we're doing it because people don't have the time to do this.
And thank you for doing it. I can't thank you enough, and I do feel that some of our listeners will want to get involved and get active. I can tell that Lori's been writing in. She's very passionate about what you're saying.
Well, I actually work, I have a full-time job. I'm passionate about this because I work in transportation. I was working with Charles on a program last year for Women Transportation Seminar in San Diego on cap and trade, and we got to talking about other issues, and that's my first inclination was to say to him, well, wait a minute, there's a major rail corridor running through San Onofre, and there's an interstate highway smack next to it. What are you talking about here? So I was completely unaware a year and a half ago of what we're talking about, but I just couldn't walk away from it knowing that this, there is power in the people of coming together.
And how are the elected officials sleeping at night? That's one of, I think Lori Taylor wrote in and said that. How do they sleep at night knowing that they've made these decisions that affect so many people?
Well, I got a Laguna Beach story for you on that. And maybe even some of your listeners remember this. I lived in Laguna for many years, lived in Dana Point. And maybe some of you will remember when there were needles washing up on our beaches. Somebody had a contract, I think, for the VA hospitals, and they were dumping waste in the ocean.
Wow.
And the needles were, rolling up on the beaches. And I thought to myself, how are these folks sleeping at night? And then the scariest part to me was that, they must surely have children or their mothers or sisters or whatever playing on these beaches too. But the real problem there is they probably have no problem sleeping at night. So those folks are cut from a different cloth. And I think it's, time to differentiate ourselves from those that are cut from that kind of cloth and do different.
And model a different way of being. And that's what Awakening Code Radio is here to help people cross that chasm, and be able to say it's time to take a stand. It's time to wake up and realize what's happening, and to put joy back into it, to not just be the naysayers, but actually to still find the balance with the joy. We were talking during the song about some of the different festivals that are happening where people come together so that we can talk about issues, but at the same time still have the music playing and get us back into joy, taking steps forward, and getting involved, but at the same time still making sure that we're spreading the peace and love message and not just doom and gloom. And I like that you have a balanced perspective about that. I can feel that about both of you, that you're not just... I find that people make fun of you if you're constantly being a naysayer about, look the sky is falling, and then people tune you out.
Well, even Edison that is, conducting these community engagement panels, they're really not even allowing people to ask questions openly. So, engagement is a two-way street. And so I think that, people just have to be a little gutsy every once in a while and step out there with their spirit and, ask the questions and protest a little. And so what if some corporate icon wants to shout you down or shut you up, you know? I mean, I attended something in Dana Point. I came up for, it was down at the Ocean Institute, that was a report out on the California Coastal Commission and the University of Santa Barbara that is trying to recreate the kelp bed out there at Wheeler North. And, it was a sad report because they weren't unable to meet their goals. But, the audience started asking some questions about radiation, which they did not want to hear. But, 4, 5, 6 people started asking questions, and they had to open up the conversation and give some answers. So there's a good example very recently, right in our backyard here in Dana Point Harbor, where that whole meeting was turned around because a handful of people started asking the question that they were, quote unquote, not allowed to.
That happened with this Dakota Access Pipeline as well. Somebody in Laos asked President Obama what he was doing about this Dakota Access Pipeline, and it stopped him dead in his tracks. And the very next day is when he put a pause on it.
It's okay to speak up.
That's right.
Well, that's the new paradigm, really. There are some big shifts, and a lot of it fueled by the internet, fueled by social media. But I was referencing back I grew up in the 60s. I was born in 60, but you go to Disneyland, most of the rides were sponsored by big companies. Monsanto had one of the big popular rides. I mean, these companies were hero companies to us, better living through chemistry and all these things. And we just believed they have our best interests at heart.
And we trusted.
And now we're seeing, they're just like everybody else. They're out kind of turning a blind eye if it's something threatening or potentially dangerous. Like, listen, this is what we do. And yeah, there's some inherent threats and everything, but we're about bottom line and profits and least amount of exposure and everything else. So that's one vein of it. But like we've been talking about, people are awakening. They are we're not the fringe that we sounded like in the 60s, 70s. Oh, you hippies with your green movement and remember that green and yellow flag, the environmental flag that had the yellow oval in it. And it's like, oh, you bleeding heart.
Oh, yeah. People have called me, are you a Birkenstock wearing tree hugger? And saying it in a negative form. And I think, so what if I was,
Well, those are the people. You look back now at the hippie movement, they were raising consciousness. I mean, about why we were going to that particular war in Vietnam or anything else. It doesn't seem crazy now. So I hope people are feeling empowered when they hear people like you, that they're thinking we can affect change. We're becoming very aware.
I'd like to point out something you can do immediately. I mean, any one of your listeners could do this immediately. All they got to do is, this Google is just great, isn't it? You can go to Google and find out, when your city council is meeting, when the Orange County supervisors are meeting. You can go in, fill out a slip, and you have 3 minutes to speak your mind. And you need to do that. I mean, if you can possibly take a look at the date and take some time off and, 3 minutes. But you have a dozen or 20 people go in with 3 minutes back to back to back to back. They're going to be listening. And that's kind of what we're talking about, too, is that, we're doing that. Public watchdogs, Charles does it, I do it.
And collaborating with other groups that are doing things.
Absolutely.
Like you talked about Gary Diedrich and his San
Let
Clemente
Laguna
Green.
Vote. We've worked with Rita Kahn and those folks as well, and trying to bring the two counties together, because after all, they're probably banking on that, that county line of separating us geographically. So we've come together with folks up here for that reason as well.
Well, we're talking about, a lot of people call it not in my backyard, but we're not talking about backyard. We're talking about the whole entire Earth's backyard. This is not a local issue, this whole thing regarding nuclear power and waste. This is a global issue. So why not? We've got wallflowers reminding us we can all be heroes. We'll be right back.
I wish you could swim like the dolphins, like dolphins can swim. No, nothing will keep us together. We can beat them forever and ever.
This is Shaman Isabella Stoloff, founder of the Orange County Healing Center. You're listening to Awakening Code Radio. Expand your consciousness every Tuesday night, right here at KX 93.5 FM.
Thank you, Shaman Isabella Stoloff. She's been a great guest over the years. I think she's been on 3 or 4 times. We're talking tonight about one of our more serious topics, about nuclear waste, nuclear generating, and the problem is the waste. If it was all just pie in the sky, and it would really be like what solar is. There's no downside to it. We're just collecting free energy. We're bouncing it, we're either gathering it, or there's some projects where we're aiming it to do the same thing, to boil water, to heat water, to turn turbines. I mean, there are, and wind turbine farms. I was just out in Joshua Tree this last weekend. Big wind turbine farms, a lot of things that have zero impact as far as residual waste, unlike nuclear power, where we figured out, hey, you have these uranium rods and they're radioactive for 1 million years. And yes, we get quick energy out of them. The problem is, what do we do with them in particular and the water that they contaminated? And we've got 104 of these plants. There's plants all over the world that have been using nuclear power. We have something we need to address. So we're not going to bury our heads in the sand and say, we'll just skip past the graveyard and let the next generation do that. We've done that long enough now. We've done that for 5 decades. Now it's up to us to say, what is the viable alternative? Can we make a difference? Can we stop something, even though, like at San Onofre, it looks like it's started but hasn't been affected? And it sounds like we can't. It sounds like you get enough people. Momentum awareness is such a huge part of it, is just creating awareness. I would imagine there's people that are listening tonight that, one, had no idea how a nuclear generation system worked and what this wastewater problem is and the uranium fuel rod problems is, why Fukushima failed and why it was such a disaster. It was just some natural events that happened. It got flooded. The backup generators couldn't run anymore, and all that containment technology just went out the window. They were just dark. I looked at YouTube videos of these guys, brave souls in Japan with flashlights doing what they could, turning valves by hand, trying to avert a big disaster. We don't want that to happen again. And it's not just our backyard. Our little planet just cannot absorb a bunch of Fukushima events happening. So, listener, we just want you to feel more empowered, not like, gosh, this is just already a runaway train that we can't do anything about. We can't.
Well, there's personal energy and passion as well. I mean, there is.
And I love what Charles was saying. This really hit me, what both of you said on the break about taking those 3 minutes. Because I said Eric would be a good voice to go to one of these hearings, because he's good on the, he can speak to things very quickly and be very articulate and passionate, and I'm saying, we should have people that are really good like that. And then you, Nina, said, but they're really affected by people that have used their voice and don't feel like they're going to be effective, but it's the human side, right?
Yeah, I mean, if your message is genuine and you're speaking from the heart, I think it's very effective. And I mean, Charles will probably be the first to tell you, the first time I spoke at our county supervisors, my knees were shaking, my voice was cracking, but I really didn't care. Mm-hmm. Because I was determined at least to, get out what I had to say that morning.
And they felt you, it sounds like.
I don't know. You have to ask him.
Well, I think what's hard to fake is authenticity. And so if you're really concerned about something and you speak publicly about it and you're authentic, it's going to be far more persuasive than someone who's a polished speaker who just kind of phones it in. I mean, no offense, Eric.
I love it. You got him.
I'm not going to call myself that polished of a speaker. Anyway.
But the other thing Charles said that I thought was very impactful, you said something about the way that we write letters and our politicians receiving letters. And I think what you said was, if they were to get 100 letters that were all the same, it wouldn't have as much of an effect as if they got 100 letters and each one was different. What did you say that would be?
Yeah, actually, handwritten letters are incredibly powerful with politicians, and unique letters are powerful. And by unique, it's when we get these involved in activist organizations, and it says, well, tell so-and-so to do this, and here's the sample letter. Well, if you take the idea that's in the letter and just put it in your own words, it's far more impactful than just sending out, signing on to the photocopy. Although that's powerful too. That does have an effect. But, when politicians see people complaining and it's coming from different directions, in different voices, in different venues, it has a really, really powerful...
Then they feel a little more boxed in.
Yeah, they do. And we were talking about consciousness, and the great psychologist Carl Jung said that you can't be aware of what you're not aware of. And, I mean, it's a terribly obvious thing. What we're trying to do, what we're urgently trying to do, is make people aware of something they're not aware of. This waste is going on the beach. It's dangerous. There are solutions. We have to get it off. There are political solutions. We need to call our elected officials, especially local elected officials. We've got to think locally on this.
Yeah, you got to keep in mind, the local elected officials live here too.
Right. And they have families.
Yeah, great. And their kids, their grandkids, and they have a stake in this. So
I think we should go into the schools and ask children to write letters.
Well,
children have a voice.
They do have a voice, yeah.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. Yeah, well, and we do want to make sure that our listeners, because this is a big arc, this is a big issue. We're talking about, as far as we know, nuclear fission and fusion are the two highest technologies that we know of. And it's served us in a certain way. It's gotten us to where we are. We have a power grid that functions seemingly quite well. We have a problem. It's not like the problem. We have a problem with waste containment and management. And all we're inviting people to do is be proactive. Say you understand that nuclear waste management is a problem in modern culture, and it's going to be a problem for the next into humanity's foreseeable future. We did a whole show about an event that I am convinced was a Russian satellite falling that had a nuclear reactor on board and lit up a giant blue field in the sky.
Was that my birthday last year?
Yeah. Oh. Yes. So, a similar thing. Russia launched 20 or so satellites in the 80s, fairly low tech by our standards, knowing full well every one of these satellites is going to fall back to Earth with a nuclear reactor on board. It is going to burn up in the atmosphere and fall to Earth. So we have to, if nothing else, we have to stop being short-sighted in our approaches to how we're going to stay on this planet.
Well, it's an opportunity for people to listen up, because it's time-sensitive opportunity, and awareness is, from
everything,
from information. So when you see something splattered on the front page with this issue, what we're talking about, take a few minutes and read it.
Well, the plant let's not forget, San Onofre got shut down from activism.
That's right.
It could have been very easily just brushed aside, like, oh, that was no big deal, and this is, great, and it's already here, and it's making all this power, and it's good for everybody, blah, 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 blah. Somebody like a bulldog terrier would not, or a watchdog, would not let go of it, and the plant got closed. Half of the problem went away pretty relatively quickly. Now we're just talking about the other half of it, not just bury it in the sand. Literally, we're talking about burying our heads in the sand. We just don't want to bury the waste in the sand next to the ocean.
It's a clear demonstration of exactly how powerful people coming together collectively, collaboratively can be.
And Victoria's writing in saying that it would be very helpful to have a bullet point or a checklist in order to write those letters, instead of writing the letter for people, just to cover these commoners topics like us, a little bit of juice to be able to throw those little bullet point facts into our letters.
That's a great idea.
That is a great idea.
Thank you, Victoria. We appreciate that. It's
like
she's right here. She's right here in the studio, all the way from Pagosa Springs, Colorado.
So we're talking about, we want to make sure everybody goes visit your sites. It's www.publicwatchdogs.org.
I think Colleen even put it on the Awakening Code Radio page too.
Awesome. So, Charles, you got anything? I want to make sure that we've covered all the things. I know how passionate you are. You guys, how did you end up writing to the station about what you wanted to do? Was it KX93 in general, and they shunted you over to us, or how did that happen?
I have no idea how I ended up here.
I'm trying to remember.
Because Monica, that works at the station.
Oh, I know how.
You were talking to someone on the beach, weren't you?
Yeah. Yeah, it was a collaboration of sorts in that interested parties were, William is actually who talked to Michelle.
Somebody talked to me, and that's how you got here?
Yeah, William talked to Michelle, and
I'm trying to remember where William was.
He was down at the Sawdust Festival.
That's right.
He saw you at the Sawdust
You're right.
Festival. And you have some common denominators here at the station, and you start talking about San Onofre, and then William called Charles and I and said, "Hey, you got to call Michelle because they can have you on and talk about this on the station."
Michelle is quite the networker and connector.
I didn't even know that's how you got here.
That's how we got here, yeah.
And I invited you to be on the show just last minute. Like, hey, you want to come and do you just got back from vacation, you want to do the nuclear waste show. And it happened from you.
Right. And I said, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, you were.
And that's
I know
William
how passionate.
D. Pizia.
Well, and Michelle, how passionate you are about the waters, because ultimately water is our lifeblood. We don't want to pollute our waters. It's kind of as simple as that. We know that waste is a byproduct of us living on this planet, whether it's just, waste from trash and paper goods and everything else. We're conscious of our wasteful way, our wasteful byproduct of just us being on the planet. The big thing about nuclear waste is how long it lasts. And we know, as I was watching some YouTube videos about Fukushima today, it's sort of the doubly sinister aspect of it is it takes like 15 to 20 years. That's where I got the 15 years that I was mentioning before these cancers start showing up. So, and it's doesn't have a little tag indicator on it. This isotope is what caused this cancer from Fukushima. Just like, people are getting cancer these days. We can't go back and say we know that person got cancer, this type of cancer from Fukushima. So I think there's a little bit of scapegoating by these big companies. Like, well, they can't pin it down on us anyway.
Well, I'd like to bring up another thing that your listeners can do. We actually came up here via San Clemente. Dr. Roger Johnson was holding dinner, and he has something posted on our website as well. And it is a petition to get the funding restored for a cancer study, specifically focused to women and children who are the most vulnerable, have the most vulnerable thyroids. There was, I believe, $8 million that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission had to do a cancer study that they decided to nix. And so Dr. Roger Johnson down in San Clemente here has a petition, and we can make a link to that on our website, that he's asking everyone to sign to restore that funding for that cancer study specific to women and children. Charles, you want to add? I'm sure I left something out.
Yeah, essentially they're spending hundreds of billions of dollars on nuclear energy, and they can't spend $8 billion on a cancer study to see if it, now in Germany they've conducted these studies, and they found that for women and children who live within 10 miles of a reactor, they have higher cancer rates. It's that simple. But the American industry does not want to grapple with this reality. It's just too horrifying to think that people are...
Too scary.
Yeah, it's just frightening.
It's just too scary, and it feels so scary and big, and what the heck can we do about it? And it's almost more comforting to think we'll just bury our head in the sand for another reason. I get that. There's some people burying their head in the sand because they didn't think they were. They trusted the big companies. Now it seems like so big, it's like, oh, golly.
Okay, but Eric, you got to keep in mind that if you bury your head in this sand, it might be radioactive sand.
Yeah, there's a big tank of waste there waiting for you. Right, well, we're going to break for another song. This is thematic as well. This is Phil Collins, a song called Another Day in Paradise. And it's just, don't go asleep at the wheel. Stay vigilant on what's happening on this planet, whether it's the people or the events or living by the waste byproduct. So we'll be right back. You're listening to Awakening Code Radio on KX 93.5.
doesn't look back. He pretends he can't hear her. Starts to whistle as he crosses the street. Seems embarrassed to be there. Oh, think twice, 'cause it's another day for you and me in paradise. Oh, think twice, 'cause it's another day for you and me in paradise. Think about it. She calls out to the man on the street. He can see she's been crying. She's got blisters on the soles of her feet. She can't walk, but she's trying. Oh, think twice, 'cause it's another day for you and me in paradise. Oh, think twice, it's just another day for you and me in paradise. Just think about it. Oh, Lord. Is there nothing more anybody can do? Oh, Lord, there must be something you can say. You can tell from the lines on her face. You can see that she's been there. Probably been moved on from every place, 'cause she didn't fit in there. Oh, think twice, 'cause it's another day for you and me in paradise. Oh, think twice, it's just another day for you and me in paradise. Just think about it. Think about it. It's just another day for you and me in paradise. It's just another day for you and me in paradise. Just think about it.
Hi, I'm Carrie Lake. I assist people to accelerate their expansion, their awakening, and their embodiment of their higher levels of awareness and all that they are. You're listening to KX 93.5, Awakening Code Radio.
Thanks, Carrie. Another great guest and friend of the show. We have many. Over 4 years, we've had, I cannot believe when the opportunity came through Tyler, in October of 2012, to have a show like this. It didn't go down easy. I had to kind of pitch it to him a few times before he thought it was something viable to talk about spirituality on a rock station. That's what KX 93.5 is, alt-generational rock, most of the play day. But we've become very popular, definitely one of the most listened to shows on the station.
Yeah, Tyler says we're the #1 listened to show.
Yeah, I don't want to toot my own horn. There's a lot of great programming on here, and there's other programming similar to ours. Greg Friedman's show is very similar topically. We're talking about this awakening, either going within or going without, but affecting change, living life more consciously in a more awakened state on purpose. And we're closing out this show talking about nuclear waste. And you, Charles, you brought up a big macro point, which is where I like to kind of keep things. And it's sort of philosophical, but you talked about species in general
Yeah, what I said was that the biological model for most organisms is they propagate, they succeed, and then they die in their own waste. And as humans, we now have the potential to avoid that fate. You know, do we just obey the biological model and die in our own waste, and waste from hydrocarbons, from nuclear waste, or are we going to find solutions for this? Are we going to be able to think our way out of this and grow out of it and literally master our own destiny? And because that's what's at stake, is the entire human species.
The big shift that needs to take place is the short-sighted shift that we have lived with. We've discovered these technologies. I can imagine the race was on in World War II. You know, it was just raging on and on and on, and the expanding theater of it that we got involved in. We were fighting two great wars at once, the Pacific theater and the European theater. What can we do? And all the while, Einstein and who was the other, Oppenheimer, and these guys that were working on the atomic energy of splitting the atom almost to the minute. They probably rushed in with a paper and said, we can do this. Government contractors said, great, how do we make a bomb out of it? Very short-sighted thinking. If we figured out how to split atoms, it probably should have been something that happened in a much more evolutionary way. It was like, okay, well, there's waste byproduct that we're going to have to think about. It's not like we're taking it off the table, but there's a lot to think about here. But it was just our thinking. Same thing with the internal combustion engine and burning gasoline. It seemed great. Look, we can make this fairly simple machine and it drive wheels and we can all get around and it's wonderful. But if you look at the byproduct, well, a lot of waste was going into the air and it was making it unbreathable, and we had to address it. I mean, back in the 70s where I lived in Claremont, there were days that we couldn't go out and do physical education, or the sports teams couldn't practice because of these smog alert days. We used to have them pretty regularly. We got proactive and said there is ways of containment waste. It's not cheap. It's not easy. The car companies complained and said, we're going to go out of business if we have to put these catalytic converters on and everything else. But we don't have those smog alerts like we had in the 70s. We're talking about shifting our attention away from the short term and thinking we want to be on this planet for a long time.
Well, we can learn a lot from history, and I work in transportation, so I'd like to kind of reach back on something you just said, Eric, and that is, if you look back in, the earlier part of the last century, there was an extensive electric vehicle charging system all over the East Coast. Henry Ford's widow drove her electric vehicle until she was like 93 because it was quiet, efficient, etc. But, you had the emergence of the combustible engine, and it was basically, gentlemen going out for Sunday tours realized they could drive as long as they want and fast and power and all that. And combined with that corporate thing that you brought up, that, there was a waste product that Rockefeller turned into gasoline to run those combustible engines. And that's how it took precedent over, a cleaner form of transportation.
Well, it was cheap.
Right.
It was cheap and abundant.
Right.
Two great things that sound good, cheap and abundant, sound good, but you can't lose sight of the whole picture.
And it was powerful.
Yes.
It was powerful too. So that all went out. But it doesn't mean that, I was working with an electric charging, small vehicle electric charging system back in the 90s, and it was like reinventing the wheel of something that already existed almost 100 years ago. So, it's not that these things can't be done. It's just that it's going to take a lot of work by a lot of people over an extended period of time. And we have an opportunity right now to get started.
Right. And we want to bring people just into the awakened mass. That's all we're trying to do.
Right.
We're not trying to instill fear, and certainly not say, hey, this is already done and it's a runaway train all by itself. It is inviting people just to be aware, one, from the supply side and how it's generated. Maybe you learned something tonight, and then things that can be done now as these plants are going offline. San Onofre now is offline. There's now, instead of 105, there's 104 plants in the country generating power this way. We're becoming better at generating power and storing it. That's a great thing. Now we are just talking about how do we make the shift from the older implosion technology or explosion technologies, like nuclear and internal combustion engines, and go to implosion technology, which is solar and wind and tide change and things like that.
And keep in mind, we're all using this energy. I mean, we do have to be responsible because we've got all these electronic devices. And
We're the consumers.
Yeah, exactly.
We need it.
We love this stuff.
Yeah.
So got to figure out a way to make it all run.
And make it safe. And
Right,
that's
and
all
make
we're
it
talking.
safe.
We're talking about the shift moment in the human story. We're talking about tonight.
This is it. This is it. And, you know, I was invited to participate and speak in a film called New Human, New Earth, New Humanity. And one of the things that the director, Lana Marconi, caught me saying on film was something that happened to me was during a meditation, I was given the phrase, evolve or become extinct. And what I was shown in this meditation was that humanity is at the point where we're facing our own extinction like the dinosaurs. And I didn't really put it all together. Tonight it's coming back into my awareness, my field. Of the way that they gave that to me, it was so powerful while I was just sitting there meditating and them saying, evolve or become extinct. And what they're saying is, the awareness is what helps us evolve. We have to have the awareness in order to come together and unify. But it's truly the unification of our species, realizing our oneness with all things, realizing that we are one with the earth. And a lot of people talk about this in our spiritual circles, but we don't really know what it means to display it. But I feel like we're coming there, and it comes through this transparency where all things are being exposed now, and it's time to pull our heads out and join together, hearts and hands, and let this be our passion. I mean, do we really want our race to expire? That's where we're facing if we don't do something. And it doesn't mean that we have to run scared. It means that we can do it with love and compassion and forgiveness for those people that we're talking about.
And with all this technology we have.
Right,
Sure.
right.
We're
And-
smarter than we've ever been.
Right.
You know, and there's a lot of people, a lot of super smart people coming up. I mean, little kids now, I feel like, are smarter than adults were. They just have this different global perspective. I have a son, 25 years old. He's not as concerned about material stuff. He is concerned about environment. He's concerned about relationships. He's concerned about his fellow human being. There is a shift going on. It's not great for industry as we've known it. It is not based as heavy on consumerism. It's just a big shift that is taking place. In some ways, it's going to be challenging to the old paradigm, but it is the opening moment to the new, to the next 1,000 years or 5,000, 10,000, hopefully million years. I mean, that would still be a blink of the eye compared to other species on this planet. Dolphins and whales have been around 40 million years looking like they look like. We could be that story as well, but we've got to get our footing, and we have to be more responsible with the way that we're living and the way we're consuming and the way we're creating waste. We just have to be more conscious and awakened and aware, and it's happening. I mean, it is happening. But the conversations like this, there is media now. We could never have a show like this would not have existed 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and there would be not one person believing it. We would have been the complete whack pack, ridiculous, you know.
Eric calls me that sometimes.
Yes.
The queen of the whack pack.
The whack pack. But I mean, we talked about that earlier in the show. You would have been the fringe, scary, running around, the sky is falling, based on nothing. Let's trust these big companies. We know that that's not the truth anymore. So we just have to individually do everything we can. And it's from the using side, it's the personal waste side, it's the consuming side, to being the watchdogs. We can be informed and be good watchdogs. Right. And that's your site, publicwatchdogs.org, is let's not just let big companies that are just only answering to the bottom line in the money-making part of it and not equating human health and safety and all that's global safety. We're talking about burying tanks in the sand by the ocean. Do they need to be? They probably don't need to be cooled. They're probably just tanks resting in the sand. Is that correct or no?
When they come out, they can be as hot as 750 degrees. Now, to put that in perspective, that means if the hair will vaporize off your body at about 452 degrees. So
Wow.
These things are very hot, and it's a problem. If there's a problem with water getting in there or something else that would affect the cooling action around these dry casks, there's a potential they could have a zirconium fire, and you're literally having another meltdown type situation. So, yeah, it's hot fuel.
Hot, and it stays hot for a long time.
It does. It stays hot for many years.
Well, one of the things we've had our eye on, I mean, I can't even begin to tell you the documentation we've gone through, but when the California Coastal Commission granted that permit last October for Edison to bury this waste, they did it under special conditions. And one of those special conditions was that Edison had to have an aging management system. In other words, some kind of technology in the ground to keep an eye out on to see if there was ever a crack, maybe after an earthquake or something like that, And they don't have that. So even just by that virtue alone, they should have been denied that, permit because they couldn't meet that special condition. So, we're trying to put a spotlight on those loopholes where maybe, that permit could be retracted, rescinded.
Well, we do encourage all of our listeners to go, and hopefully within maybe a couple of weeks, you can do this like a bullet point thing, so it's not a form letter, but they can sound informed when they write to their local politician or congressman or anybody and just say, I'm not just some goofball that says, I don't want nuclear anything, a knee-jerk activist. Here's some very real facts. I want you, and maybe our politicians aren't even aware of them.
Oh, they're aware, and public watchdogs would be happy to put that together. I think that's a great idea, and we welcome, you can get on our website and give us input. And these ideas, would welcome any ideas like this that your listeners would come up with, wouldn't we, Charles?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for the work you're doing.
I love how collaborative you are and open to hearing suggestions and working with people who are passionate about this issue. And I don't think a lot of people even knew to be passionate about it, but you're giving us the reason to look further.
And you're I'm guessing that these aren't paid positions at public watchdogs.
No, not at all.
Yeah, you're like us. It's you have jobs and you're doing your real life stuff.
Paid in passion. It's paid in passion. And I use this term a lot that maybe your listeners might be able to relate to might be able to relate or respond to, and that is brainstorming.
Heartstorming.
We do a lot of brainstorming, and so, if somebody wants to join in, become a member, and you have an opportunity to give us input online, we welcome it, and hopefully we can brainstorm together to come up with some new ideas we haven't thought of.
So the timeline, you said that they've actually already started trucking in some of these tanks.
Oh no, they've been sitting on the beach. They've been delivered. You can look at them on our site. I took the pictures last August. I was actually having eye surgery done up here in San Clemente, and I was going past every day, and I just decided to start stopping in and taking pictures. And they've been there for a little over a year now, and I've been working with these agencies that have, we've done programs in San Diego. Actually, Rita Kahn here from Let Laguna Vote came down and was one of our speakers, and a gentleman from the California Energy Commission. It is encouraging to note that when the Nuclear Regulatory Commission was considering and they gave an exemption to Edison for some emergency planning exemptions, that our California Energy Commissioner Chair Weisenmiller vehemently opposed the NRC doing that. So, this is not a lost cause by any means. There are some champions in Sacramento. We need to support them.
Maybe you could list all those as well. You probably already do.
We do have some of that information already online.
Could the tanks that were delivered, could those be transported to other places? Could those same tanks that they've already spent money on, could they be put on train cars and taken someplace else?
That's one of the big concerns, is how transportable these things are. They're only a half-inch thick, and the problem is the stuff inside weighs at minimum 350,000 pounds. So anything moving one of these has to be super, super heavy duty.
However, there was a gentleman that Edison brought into the community engagement panel program down, in June? And
yeah, their last meeting.
Yeah, that said it could be flown out of here.
Oh, those tanks themselves could be flown out?
Tomorrow. Yeah.
That's what he said. It could be flown out of here tomorrow.
With the material in them?
Exactly.
But he didn't specify where it would go. That's the problem.
We just need to pick an island, someplace,
Yeah.
and just the nuclear waste dump island and make it super safe.
Well, we had never heard that before, though.
That they could be transported.
Right.
Well, that would be good. Well, thank you so much, for both of you, for joining us and driving up from San Diego and just following your passion. And, you're walking, talking, living examples of, hey, do something. You're both doing something outside of this is not your job. This is you just thinking, I'm going to do something. And you're creating awareness. And so thank you so much for doing it.
It's about I could not do something.
Right. And once you become aware, it's almost like you cannot not do something.
Right,
so thank you for doing that. Well, Michelle, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I have a lot to think about, and
We all do.
yeah, and we can all be a voice. That's the one takeaway that I have is if I have nothing else, I have my voice and my heart, and that's what we should all be thinking about right now is how to use our voices and how to unite.
In the end of my favorite movie, your second favorite movie, Lucy, Morgan Freeman is saying all this information could just lead to chaos. All this awareness that you got and you're going to share with humanity could just end up being chaos. And she's like, information never leads to chaos. Information leads to answers. So that's what you're doing. You're sharing information, and we're going to figure these things out. Thank you for joining us on Awakening Code Radio. We'll be back next Tuesday with another great show. Here is, who is this? Follow the Sun. You know who this is, right?
This is, it's not coming to me.
Jason Henson sent it to us. I love this song. I just can't remember who does it.
Is it Xavier Rudd?
Might be. Anyway,
Xavier Rudd.
Thank you. We'll be back next week on Awakening Code Radio, KX 93.5.
Follow the sun, and which way the wind blows when this day is done. Breathe in the air, set your intentions, dream with care. Tomorrow's a new day for everyone, and a brand new moon and brand new sun. Follow the sun, the direction of the birds, the direction of love. Breathe in the air, cherish this moment, cherish this breath. Tomorrow's a new day for everyone, a brand new moon.